You don't usually realize you're being used while it's happening, because if you did, you'd leave. And that's exactly why manipulation rarely looks like manipulation in the beginning. It looks like attention, like intensity, like someone choosing you in a world full of options. And that feeling alone can blur your judgment more than any lie ever could. At first, they're consistent, curious, emotionally available, maybe even vulnerable in a way that makes you feel special for being trusted. And you tell yourself this must be love because it feels consuming. It feels magnetic. It feels like finally being seen. But here's the question most people avoid. Are they loving you, or are they loving what you provide? Because love invests in your growth, while use invests in your output. Love asks how your day was and actually listens. Use asks what you can do and disguises it as connection. The difference is subtle at first, almost invisible, because the human brain is wired to protect emotional bonds once formed, especially if you've already attached, especially if you've already imagined a future. And that's where it becomes dangerous. When someone is using you, they don't drain you all at once. They extract slowly. They take your time, your emotional labor, your reassurance, your validation, your resources, your body, your loyalty, and they give back just enough to keep the supply flowing. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's about ego. Sometimes you're the therapist. Sometimes you're the backup plan. Sometimes you're the emotional punching bag. Sometimes you're the status symbol. But rarely are you the priority. And the scariest part, you might mistake endurance for devotion. You might think the exhaustion you feel is proof that you care deeply. But love should not feel like constantly auditioning for stability. If you are always proving, always reassuring, always adjusting yourself to keep the peace, you are not being loved, you are being managed. Real love doesn't require you to shrink so someone else can stay comfortable. It doesn't disappear when you set a boundary. It doesn't punish you with silence when you say no. Pay attention to what happens when you stop overgiving. Do they lean closer, or do they pull away? Because users are attached to access, not attachment. The moment access changes, their energy changes. And yet, many people stay because they're addicted to the potential version of the person. The version that appears in moments of sweetness, in rare vulnerability, in flashes of affection that feel like proof that everything is real. But intensity is not consistency. Chemistry is not character. And attention is not commitment. If someone only shows up when it benefits them, if their kindness increases when they need something, if your value in the relationship seems tied to your usefulness, then you are not being chosen. You are being leveraged. And the most painful realization is this. Sometimes they don't even consciously think they're using you. For some people, relationships are transactions they learned in childhood. Love meant performance. Affection meant utility. Approval meant usefulness. So they repeat what they know. But understanding their psychology doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. You can empathize without tolerating depletion. Ask yourself this. When you are with them, do you feel safe being imperfect? Or do you feel subtly evaluated? Do you feel supported in your ambitions? Or subtly threatened when you grow? Do they celebrate your independence? Or do they only feel secure when you revolve around them? Users crave control more than connection. They prefer you slightly insecure, because insecurity is easier to manipulate than confidence. They might criticize you just enough to destabilize you, then comfort you just enough to keep you attached. This push-pull dynamic creates emotional addiction. Uncertainty increases obsession, because your brain starts chasing reassurance like a reward, and suddenly, you're not asking, do they love me? You're asking, how do I make them love me again? That shift right there is the trap. Love does not need to be re-earned every week. If someone truly loves you, their baseline doesn't vanish because you had a bad day, set a limit, or asked for reciprocity. So observe patterns, not promises. Anyone can speak beautifully about loyalty, depth, forever, but patterns expose priorities. Do they show up when you're inconvenient? Do they respect your time? Do they give without being prompted? Or does everything feel slightly imbalanced? Slightly one-sided, slightly draining in ways you can't fully explain but constantly feel. Your body usually knows before your mind admits it. That tightness in your chest, that overthinking at night, that anxiety when they don't reply, that relief when they finally do. That emotional roller coaster is not romance, it's instability. And instability keeps you hooked because your nervous system confuses unpredictability with passion. But love should regulate you, not dysregulate you. It should create calm, not chaos disguised as excitement. And here's where most people struggle. Admitting you're being used feels humiliating. It feels like admitting you weren't chosen for who you are. So instead, you rationalize, they're just stressed. They've been hurt before. They'll change once things settle. But how long have you been waiting for things to settle? And why does their growth depend entirely on your patience? The truth is, if someone benefits from you more than they build with you, they are invested in extraction, not expansion. Love expands both people. Use drains one to elevate the other. And if you constantly feel like you're giving more than you're receiving, not occasionally, but consistently, then you're not in a partnership. You're in a supply chain. And the longer you stay in that dynamic, the more your standards quietly erode. You start accepting breadcrumbs because you're afraid of starvation. You start praising minimal effort because you're terrified of losing even that. And without realizing it, you teach them how little they need to do to keep you. But this doesn't start with them. It starts with you, with what you believe you deserve, with what you tolerate, with what you fear losing more than yourself. And before we go deeper, you need to confront something uncomfortable. If they left tomorrow, would you miss them, or would you miss the role you played in their life? If they left tomorrow, and what you'd miss most is the feeling of being needed, the late-night intensity, the sense of purpose you felt while fixing their chaos. Then what you were attached to wasn't love, it was identity, and that's where the trap tightens. Because when your value in a relationship becomes tied to how much you can endure, rescue, tolerate, or provide, you slowly confuse self-sacrifice with intimacy. You begin to measure closeness by how indispensable you are, not by how deeply you are understood. And the more indispensable you try to become, the less irreplaceable you actually are. Because users don't bond through depth, they bond through dependency. If someone is using you, they don't need to know your fears, your dreams, your childhood wounds, your inner world. They just need to know what you'll tolerate and how reliably you'll show up when called. That's why you might notice something subtle but disturbing. They know how to trigger your empathy faster than they know how to nurture your heart. They know which stories will soften you. They know which apologies will reset you. They know which compliments will reignite you. But do they know what truly matters to you beyond how it serves them? Think carefully. When you're struggling, do they sit in your discomfort with patience, or do they grow distant when the spotlight shifts away from them? Because love can handle shared vulnerability. Use becomes uncomfortable when you are no longer the stable supplier of emotional energy. And here's the painful irony. The more you give in hopes of securing love, the more the dynamic exposes itself. Notice how the balance never truly stabilizes. When you pull back slightly, the relationship feels threatened. When you ask for equal effort, you're labeled demanding. When you set boundaries, you're told you're changing. But changing is exactly what growth looks like, and growth is what users fear most. Because growth creates independence, and independence reduces control. So they might subtly discourage your evolution. Not overtly, not dramatically, just small comments, small doubts, small guilt trips. You've been different lately. You don't care like you used to. You're too focused on yourself. And if you're not careful, you'll interpret these statements as warnings instead of what they really are. Resistance to losing access. A person who loves you will adjust with you. A person who uses you will pressure you to remain convenient. And convenience is not connection. It's availability without reciprocity. Pay attention to how conflict is handled. In love, conflict becomes collaboration to people versus the problem. In use, conflict becomes leverage. One person versus the other. If arguments always circle back to your shortcomings, your tone, your reaction, your flaws, while their behavior remains untouched, you're not resolving issues. You're being conditioned to doubt yourself, conditioned to apologize for having needs. And the more you over-explain, the more you weaken your own clarity. This is how emotional manipulation works at its quietest level. Not screaming, not threats. Just subtle redirection of accountability until you're the one questioning your reality. And still, part of you stays hopeful. Because they're not bad all the time. They can be warm. They can be attentive. They can even be protective. But here's the distinction. Are they protective of you, or protective of their position in your life? When someone truly loves you, your well-being matters, even if it inconveniences them. When someone is using you, your well-being matters only when it doesn't disrupt their comfort. And you'll notice this, especially when you stop over-functioning, stop initiating, stop solving, stop reminding, stop overextending. Watch what happens. Does the relationship collapse under the weight of your absence? If so, it was never built on mutual effort. It was built on your maintenance. And that realization hurts because it forces you to confront a deeper fear. The fear that maybe you accepted less. Because you didn't believe you'd receive more. Sometimes we tolerate being used not because we're weak, but because we're afraid of emptiness. We choose partial affection over solitude. We choose inconsistency over silence. We choose potential over reality. And in doing so, we abandon ourselves before anyone else has to. But here's the truth. Most people avoid. Love doesn't feel like constant anxiety. It doesn't feel like walking on emotional eggshells. It doesn't feel like calculating every word to avoid withdrawal. Love feels steady, not boring, steady. There's a difference. Steady doesn't spike your adrenaline. It stabilizes your nervous system. And if chaos feels more familiar than calm, you might mistake turbulence for depth. That's why breaking free from being used isn't just about recognizing the other person's behavior. It's about recognizing your own pattern. Do you overgive to earn security? Do you equate being needed with being valued? Do you fear that without constant effort, you'll be replaced? Because users don't create those fears, they exploit them. They sense where your validation lives and attach themselves to it. And until you move your validation inward, you'll remain vulnerable to anyone who offers you temporary importance. So the real question isn't only are they using me? It's why does being used still feel like something I'm willing to negotiate? That's where self-respect enters the conversation. Not ego, not pride, self-respect. The quiet decision that your energy is not a public resource. The understanding that love must be mutual, not extracted. And the courage to admit that sometimes, Walking away isn't losing someone, it's regaining yourself. But before you reach that point, you'll likely face one final test: when you begin to detach. When you begin to reclaim your time, your attention, your emotional investment, they may suddenly intensify their affection. They may promise change. They may mirror everything you once asked for. And in that moment, you'll have to decide whether you're responding to consistent transformation or reacting to the fear of losing what once felt powerful. Because temporary improvement under threat is not the same as lasting growth. And if you ignore that difference, you risk restarting the cycle from the beginning, only this time with deeper scars and thinner hope. And this is where most people relapse. Not because they are foolish, but because hope is louder than memory. When someone senses they're losing control, they often become the version of themselves you begged for in the beginning. They communicate better. They show up on time. They speak your love language. They suddenly understand your boundaries, and it feels validating, almost victorious, like all your patience finally paid off. But ask yourself something critical. Did they change because they understood your pain, or because they feared losing access to your benefits? Real change happens when someone takes responsibility without being threatened by departure. Reactive change only appears when consequences become real. And if improvement only shows up when you detach, then what you're witnessing isn't growth, it's strategy. This is why cycles of being used are so psychologically powerful. Intermittent reinforcement, moments of affection scattered between periods of neglect, creates one of the strongest emotional addictions known to the human brain. The unpredictability makes the reward feel more valuable. You start chasing the good version of them like it's proof that the connection is real, even though consistency would have been the real proof all along. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin negotiating your standards. You tell yourself, at least they're trying, at least they came back, at least they care now. But why did caring require distance to activate? Why did your worth only become visible when it was almost unavailable? Love does not awaken only in crisis. It exists in daily effort. It exists in small reliability. It exists in boring loyalty. And if someone's affection feels strongest when you're walking away, then they are attached to the chase, not to you. This is where clarity demands courage. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing how apologies feel polished but not transformative. How promises sound emotionally intelligent but lack behavioral evidence. How conversations about us still orbit around their needs. And the hardest part is admitting that you may have participated in maintaining the dynamic. Not because you deserved it, but because you tolerated it. You answered every late-night call. You forgave without repaired trust. You gave access without accountability. And in doing so, you unintentionally taught them that your boundaries were flexible under pressure. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But healing requires ownership of your participation, not just awareness of their manipulation. Because if you don't examine why you stayed, you risk repeating the pattern with someone new wearing a different face. Being used often feels like love to people who were conditioned to equate effort with worth. If you grew up earning attention through achievement, compliance, emotional caretaking, or silence, then relationships built on performance will feel strangely familiar. You won't immediately recognize the imbalance because overfunctioning feels normal. Giving more feels natural. Fixing feels like purpose. And when someone leans on you heavily, it feels like validation. But there's a difference between being valued and being relied on as a resource. Value includes appreciation and reciprocity. Resource includes consumption and replacement. And the moment you become replaceable in their emotional economy, you'll sense its subtle shifts in attention, subtle comparisons, subtle distance. Users often keep alternatives, not always physically, but emotionally. Backup conversations, backup admirers, because their security comes from options, not commitment. And if you ever feel like you're competing for basic effort, that's not romance. That's insecurity management on their end. A person who loves you protects the bond. A person who uses you protects their leverage. So ask yourself honestly, when you express discomfort, do they lean in or defend themselves? When you succeed independently, do they celebrate or subtly minimize? When you need support, do they show up consistently or become unavailable? Patterns tell the truth, emotions try to ignore, and your body often reacts before your pride allows your mind to accept it. Exhaustion, anxiety, overthinking, emotional burnout. These are not side effects of deep love. They are signs of imbalance. An imbalance, sustained long enough, erodes. You start doubting your perceptions. You start lowering expectations. You start rationalizing disrespect as complexity. But clarity begins the moment you stop asking, how can I fix this? And start asking, why am I the only one trying to? Because love is mutual effort, not solo endurance. If the relationship only functions when you overextend, it is not partnership, it is dependency structured around your output. And here is the final layer most people avoid confronting. Sometimes walking away from being used doesn't just cost you the person, it costs you the fantasy, the imagined future, the identity you built around being their constant, the hope that your loyalty would eventually convert into security. Letting go means grieving what never truly existed in the way you believed it did, and that grief can feel heavier than the relationship itself. But grief is clean pain. Being used is chronic pain. One heals you, the other slowly empties you. So the real power move isn't proving your worth to someone who benefits from doubting it. The real power move is withdrawing access from anyone who treats your love like a renewable resource. Because it isn't. Your time isn't infinite. Your emotional energy isn't disposable. And your presence is not a privilege someone earns once and owns forever. It must be respected continuously. And if you've reached the point where you're questioning whether you're loved or leveraged, that question alone is information. Secure love does not create chronic confusion. It creates clarity. And the moment you choose clarity over attachment, something shifts inside you, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop over-explaining your needs. You stop shrinking to maintain peace. And in that space, something unfamiliar but powerful begins to grow. Self-respect strong enough to walk away, even when part of you still hopes they might finally become what you needed all along. And when self-respect becomes stronger than hope, the dynamic changes in a way that cannot be reversed. Because once you stop negotiating your worth, you stop participating in relationships that require you to. This is the moment where clarity feels both empowering and terrifying. Empowering because you finally see the pattern without distortion. Terrifying because now you have a decision to make. Staying no longer feels innocent. It feels intentional. You can no longer claim confusion. You recognize the imbalance. You recognize the emotional taxation. You recognize how often your needs were postponed to preserve connection. And now, the only real question left is whether you are willing to lose the relationship in order to stop losing yourself. That is the crossroads most people avoid for years. Because leaving someone who is using you doesn't always mean they were entirely cruel. Sometimes they were charming. Sometimes they were wounded. Sometimes they truly believed they cared. But caring is not the same as loving well. Intention does not cancel impact. And if the impact of the relationship is chronic depletion, then no amount of good moments can justify long-term erosion. This is where emotional maturity separates fantasy from fact. Fantasy says, but we had chemistry. Fact asks, but did we have consistency? Fantasy says, they have potential. Fact asks, but are they living it? Fantasy says, what if they change? Fact asks, why haven't they already? And when you start asking better questions, you stop accepting vague answers. Because love that is real does not fear examination. It doesn't collapse under accountability. It doesn't rely on you doubting your standards to survive. It welcomes mutual effort because it understands that partnership is not about access, it's about alignment. And alignment requires both people to invest, not one to supply and the other to receive. If you've been used, there will be a phase where anger surfaces, not just toward them, but toward yourself. You'll replay conversations. You'll recognize red flags you ignored. You'll notice moments where your intuition whispered and you silenced it. That anger is not weakness. It's awakening. It's your nervous system recalibrating after prolonged imbalance. But don't let anger turn into shame. You were not naive for wanting connection. You were human. The only mistake would be repeating the lesson without reflection. Because the ultimate transformation isn't learning how to detect users. It's learning how to stop being available for exploitation. And that begins with boundaries that don't require explanation essays. Boundaries that are calm, firm, and consistent. Not reactive, not dramatic, just clear. When someone asks more than you are willing to give, the answer is no. When someone disrespects your time, access decreases. When someone withdraws affection as punishment, you do not chase, you observe. These are not games. They are standards, and standards filter faster than confrontation ever will. The right person will adjust without resentment. The wrong person will expose themselves through resistance. And this is the shift that defines whether you are loved or used. In love, your individuality is protected. In use, your individuality is inconvenient. A healthy partner encourages your independence, your friendships, your growth, your ambition. A user subtly centers themselves as the axis of your world. Over time, isolation can creep in quietly. Your schedule revolves around them. Your energy is reserved for them. Your decisions are filtered through how they might react. And one day you realize you've been shrinking your world to keep someone comfortable who never expanded theirs for you. That realization is painful, but it is also liberating. Because once you see that you've been overfunctioning, you can stop. And when you stop overfunctioning, you give the relationship space to reveal its true structure. Either it stabilizes through mutual effort, or it collapses because it was never built to stand without your constant reinforcement. And if it collapses, that is not failure, that is exposure. You did not lose love. You lost an arrangement that required you to carry it alone. Real love does not require exhaustion as proof. It does not demand that you trade peace for presence. It does not fluctuate based on your usefulness. It remains steady because it is rooted in respect. And respect is the foundation users cannot fake for long. They can imitate affection. They can perform romance. They can mirror empathy, but sustained respect requires character. And character reveals itself over time, especially when you assert your needs without apology. So if you're still asking whether you're being loved or being used, observe how the person responds when you prioritize yourself. Do they feel threatened, distant, irritated, or do they feel supportive, proud, secure, because your growth should not endanger genuine love. It should strengthen it. In the end, the most powerful realization is this: being alone is not the same as being unloved. Sometimes solitude is the space where you relearn your own value without negotiation. Sometimes walking away from being used is the first act of loving yourself correctly. And when you finally experience mutual, balanced, steady affection, not intense, not chaotic, not transactional, you will look back and recognize how loud the imbalance once was. You will realize that love was never supposed to feel like constant proving. It was supposed to feel like peace. And once you know the difference, you will never again confuse being needed with being cherished. And when you finally experience peace instead of pressure, stability instead of suspense, something inside you recalibrates permanently. Because for the first time you understand that love was never supposed to feel like survival. It was never meant to feel like earning oxygen. It was never designed to keep you in a constant state of analysis, decoding tone, measuring effort, tracking consistency like an investigator, instead of simply existing as a partner. Real love doesn't demand hypervigilance. It doesn't keep you bracing for emotional withdrawal. It doesn't require you to shrink your personality to avoid triggering insecurity. When you step out of a dynamic where you are being used, the silence that follows can feel unfamiliar. There are no chaotic highs, no dramatic reconciliations, no urgent late-night apologies. And at first, that calm might feel empty. But emptiness is not always loss. Sometimes it is detox. Sometimes it is your nervous system finally coming down from prolonged instability. And in that stillness, you begin to see clearly. You begin to recognize how much mental space was occupied by someone who gave you uncertainty disguised as passion. You begin to see how often you overextended to secure something that should have been freely given. And the most uncomfortable realization surfaces. You were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. That distinction changes everything. Because once you understand that your needs were valid, your standards stop feeling dramatic. Wanting consistency is not controlling. Wanting reassurance is not weakness. Wanting reciprocity is not selfish. These are baseline requirements for healthy attachment. The problem was never that you desired depth. The problem was investing depth into someone who only desired access. And here is the final truth that sets you free. People who use you rely on yourself. They rely on you second-guessing your instincts. They rely on you fearing loneliness more than you value respect. The moment you choose respect over attachment, the leverage disappears. Because leverage only works when you are afraid to walk away. Once you accept that walking away might hurt, but staying will hollow you out, the fear loses its grip. And this is where your power quietly returns. Not in revenge, not in proving anything, but in detachment, in emotional discipline, in no longer reacting to breadcrumbs, in no longer chasing clarity from someone committed to confusion. You start investing your energy differently. You pour into your growth, your health, your goals, your peace. You rebuild the relationship you have with yourself, the one that was neglected while you were busy sustaining someone else. And ironically, this is when healthier love becomes possible. Because you no longer enter connections looking to be chosen. You enter already choosing yourself. You no longer overgive to secure position. You observe. You evaluate. You allow effort to meet effort. You let consistency prove intention. And when someone truly loves you, you will notice something profound. You will not feel the need to question it. You will not be analyzing mixed signals. You will not be begging for balance. You will not be decoding silence. Love will feel steady, clear, mutual, and most importantly, safe. Safe to speak, safe to grow, safe to exist without performance. So if you've been wondering whether you're being loved or being used, understand this. The confusion itself is data. Healthy love does not breed chronic uncertainty. If you constantly feel like you are proving, chasing, adjusting, or surviving the relationship, that is your answer. And now the responsibility shifts to you. Not to fix them, not to change them, but to decide what you will and will not participate in. Because the quality of your relationships will always mirror the standards you enforce, not the words you speak. You teach people how to treat you by what you consistently allow. And the moment you stop allowing imbalance, you stop attracting those who depend on it. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming selective. It's about understanding that your love is valuable, and anything valuable requires discernment. You are not here to be someone's emotional supply. You are not here to be convenient. You are not here to audition for permanence. You are here to build something reciprocal, something aligned, something rooted in mutual respect. And if that means walking alone for a while, then walk with your head high. Because solitude with self-respect will always outweigh connection with self-betrayal. Now ask yourself honestly, are you being loved? Or are you being used? And if this message resonated with you, if it made you uncomfortable in a way that felt revealing, then don't ignore that feeling. Sit with it, reflect on it, and most importantly, act on it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what part hit you the hardest. Share this with someone who might need clarity but hasn't found the words yet. And if you're committed to building emotional strength, psychological awareness, and relationships rooted in power and respect, then subscribe and stay connected, because the next conversation might be the one that changes how you see yourself forever.